When we talk about empathy, most of us immediately think of it as one of the greatest strengths a person can have. And in so many ways that's true. To be able to feel with someone, to sense their pain, to understand their struggles, those are beautiful qualities. They make you human in the most meaningful sense, but here's the part we rarely admit. When empathy becomes constant, when it becomes the lens you look through in every single interaction, it can actually weigh you down. It can shift from being a gift into becoming a burden that silently drains you, and the dangerous thing is, you may not even notice it happening until you feel completely exhausted in your relationships. See, what empathy does is it opens the door for you to carry emotions that aren't even yours. Someone you love is hurting, and you don't just acknowledge it, you take it in. Their anxiety becomes your anxiety. Their disappointment becomes your disappointment. Their problems start to feel like they're sitting on your chest every night before you fall asleep. And the thing is, you do it out of love. You do it because you genuinely care, but caring so deeply that you forget your own emotional space doesn't serve anyone well, not you, and not the person you're trying to love. Imagine a friend coming to you every single day with their struggles. They vent, they cry, they unload. And instead of simply being present, listening, and offering comfort, you begin to feel like you have to fix everything for them. You think it's your responsibility to carry their burden. What ends up happening is you begin to lose your own voice in the relationship. The friendship stops being about a mutual bond and starts revolving around how much of their pain you can handle. That's when empathy quietly stops being a strength and starts becoming a barrier. Friendship is meant to be a two-way street, but when empathy goes unchecked, it pulls you into a cycle of overcarrying. You stop showing up as your authentic self because you're constantly adjusting to the emotions in the room. You can't laugh as freely, you can't share your own struggles, and sometimes you even feel guilty for being happy when your friend is not. And the weight of that builds up. It builds so silently that by the time you realize how heavy it is, you're already distant, already drained, and maybe even questioning if the friendship is worth it. What makes this even trickier is that the world praises empathy. People will tell you, "You're such a good listener," or "You're always there for everyone." And while those compliments feel good, they can also trap you. They create this unspoken expectation that you always have to be the strong one, the available one, the one who never says no. Without realizing it, you begin to equate your worth with how much weight you can carry for other people. And that is a heavy place to live. Here's the truth you need to hear. It's not your job to carry everyone else's feelings. It's not your role to absorb the storm just because you care about the person standing in the rain. Real friendship doesn't require that. In fact, when you step into someone else's pain so deeply that you drown in it, you rob them of the chance to stand up, to grow, to work through their struggle with their own strength. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to hold space, to listen, to simply be there, without letting their pain take residence in your own heart. Think about it this way: if every time you walked into a friendship, you carried their baggage along with yours, how far do you think you could really go? Eventually, you'd be too weighed down to take another step, and friendships, like any relationship, are about walking together, moving forward, not just standing still in the middle of someone else's hurt. So the hidden weight of constant empathy is this: it keeps you stuck, it silences your joy, it makes you feel responsible for things that were never yours to own. And slowly, it chips away at the balance that friendships need to survive. The longer you carry it, the more you start to lose yourself. And maybe that's the real danger. When empathy stops you from being yourself in a friendship, you're no longer giving the best of who you are. You're only giving a tired, drained, and watered-down version, and that's not what true friends need from you. They don't need you to lose yourself to prove you care. They don't need you to sacrifice your own peace to validate their struggles. What they really need is your presence, your honesty, and sometimes even your distance, because only then can the relationship breathe, only then can it remain healthy. So here's the line to remember: empathy is powerful, but when it becomes constant and unchecked, it doesn't just weigh you down, it quietly builds a barrier between you and the very friendship you're trying so hard to protect. Friendship at its best is about give and take, it's about balance, but sometimes empathy pushes us into a place where balance disappears, and what remains is something far more draining: self-sacrifice. And I don't mean the kind of healthy sacrifice that all relationships require from time to time. I'm talking about the kind of sacrifice where you slowly erase your own needs in order to keep the other person comfortable. That's where empathy, instead of building a bridge, begins to build walls. The truth is, being a supportive friend doesn't mean abandoning yourself. Yet many of us fall into this trap. We think, if I'm really a good friend, I'll always put their needs above mine. I'll always be available, no matter how I feel, no matter what I'm going through. It sounds noble, it even sounds admirable, but when you live that way consistently, it creates an unspoken expectation. And soon that expectation turns into a cycle. You become the friend who's always there, always listening, always giving, while the other person grows comfortable taking more than they give. What's interesting is that this imbalance rarely starts intentionally. Most people don't set out to take advantage of your empathy. But the more you give without boundaries, the more others come to believe that this is who you are, this is your role, this is the dynamic. And little by little, you lose yourself in the process. Your needs start to feel like interruptions, like inconveniences. You stop speaking up when you're tired, when you're struggling, when you're hurting, because you've trained yourself to believe that friendship is about self-sacrifice. Let me ask you something. Have you ever found yourself in a conversation where your friend is unloading everything going on in their life, and inside, you're crumbling? Maybe you've had the hardest week of your year, but you stay quiet, you nod, you encourage, you reassure. You give them what they need, but no one gives you space to breathe, and you leave the conversation feeling heavier than before. That's not balance, that's empathy pushing you past your own limits. A friendship without balance is not sustainable. At some point, your energy runs out. You can't keep pouring from an empty cup, and yet many people keep trying. They stretch themselves thinner and thinner until what they're offering isn't genuine anymore, it's forced. And when your presence becomes forced, the relationship suffers. The other person may not even notice the shift, but inside, resentment begins to build. It's important to understand that friendship isn't a test of how much you can sacrifice. Real friendship thrives when both people feel seen, when both people feel safe to share, when both people can count on each other. Empathy is powerful, but if it convinces you that your needs don't matter, then it stops being love and starts being self-erasure. And a friendship built on one person erasing themselves is not a healthy friendship. It's an imbalance disguised as loyalty. Think of it like walking across a bridge. If only one side of the bridge is strong, eventually the whole thing collapses. In the same way, if only one person's needs are acknowledged and cared for, eventually the friendship breaks down. It may not happen overnight, but slowly the strain shows up in little cracks, misunderstandings, unspoken frustrations, exhaustion that no one talks about. And when those cracks grow wide enough, the friendship either falls apart, or it keeps standing but without the joy it once had. Sometimes we mistake empathy for silence. We think staying quiet about our needs is the kind thing to do. We believe we're protecting the friendship by putting ourselves last. But in reality, silence creates distance. If you never let your friend know when you're struggling, if you never allow yourself to be cared for, then you deny them the chance to love you in return. You rob them of the opportunity to step up, to support, to give, and maybe, just maybe, that's what they want to do, but they don't know how, because you never open that door. Here's the shift that needs to happen. Empathy should lead to connection, not self-sacrifice. It should create space for honesty, not silence. If you can listen to your friend's pain, you should also feel safe enough to share your own. That's the balance, that's the give and take that makes a friendship strong. The challenge is learning to recognize when your empathy is crossing that line. Pay attention to your own emotions. Do you walk away from conversations feeling uplifted or always drained? Do you feel safe to share, or do you constantly censor yourself so you don't add to their burden? Do you feel like the friendship is growing both of you, or only one of you? Those answers matter, because they reveal whether your empathy is helping the friendship or quietly hurting it. So the next time you're tempted to erase your needs in the name of being the good friend, remember this. Friendship isn't a competition to see who can sacrifice the most. It's about balance. It's about walking side by side, both people carrying some of the weight, both people offering some of the strength. That's where friendship grows, not in self-sacrifice, but in shared strength. Empathy builds connection, but without balance, it slowly drains it away. One of the most overlooked ways empathy can hold us back in friendships is when it quietly turns into people-pleasing. At first, it looks the same. You care deeply about your friend, you don't want to hurt them, you want them to feel supported. But instead of being honest when something bothers you, or when you disagree, you soften your words, you sugarcoat the truth. Sometimes you stay completely silent, and you justify it to yourself by saying, I don't want to upset them. I don't want to add to what they're already going through. But what you're really doing is burying your own voice in the name of empathy. It sounds small, but over time it's anything but, because friendships grow on honesty, not performance. If every time something uncomfortable comes up you choose to withhold how you really feel, you may keep the peace in the moment, but you lose authenticity in the long run. And without authenticity, the friendship you're protecting isn't real, it's a version of it, a shallow layer where everything looks fine on the outside but feels fragile underneath. Empathy becomes people-pleasing when you prioritize keeping your friend happy over telling them the truth, and maybe you've experienced this. Your friend makes a choice you know isn't good for them, but instead of saying what's on your heart, you nod and say, I understand. Or maybe they hurt you with something they said, but you decide it's easier to let it slide rather than risk a hard conversation. Each time you do that, a piece of honesty is taken out of the friendship, and piece by piece, the bond becomes weaker. The irony is that people-pleasing often comes from a good place. You don't want conflict. You don't want your friend to feel judged. You think you're protecting the relationship, but conflict avoided isn't conflict resolved. Pain unspoken doesn't just disappear, it sits there. It lingers in the silence, and eventually, it grows into distance, because when you stop being fully honest, you stop being fully present. And here's the thing, friends know when you're holding back. They may not say it, but they can feel it. They sense when your "it's fine" isn't really fine. They notice when you laugh but your eyes are tired, when you agree but your tone carries hesitation. And while you think you're doing them a favor by protecting their feelings, what they feel instead is a gap they can't quite explain. That's how relationships lose depth, not through arguments, but through quiet dishonesty in the name of empathy. Real friendship needs truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable, because truth creates trust, and without trust, there's no real friendship, only a fragile arrangement where both people perform a role. People-pleasing keeps everyone comfortable, but it keeps no one connected. Now, some of you might say, but what if telling the truth hurts them? And yes, it might. Honesty isn't always easy to hear, but a hard truth spoken with care is far more loving than a silence that leaves the other person in the dark. Sometimes the most empathetic thing you can do is tell your friend what they don't want to hear, because that's what will help them grow. That's what will keep the relationship real. Friendship doesn't need you to be agreeable, it needs you to be authentic. If your empathy makes you a mirror that only reflects what your friend wants to see, then you're not really standing beside them, you're standing behind a mask. And eventually, that mask becomes heavy. You begin to resent the role you're playing, you start to feel unseen, unheard, even though you're the one who chose silence. It's worth asking yourself, am I being kind, or am I being nice? Because kindness and niceness are not the same. Niceness avoids tension. Niceness says whatever keeps things light. Kindness, on the other hand, risks the discomfort of truth for the sake of something deeper. Kindness says, I care too much about this friendship to let dishonesty creep in. And the more you choose kindness over niceness, the more your friendships are built on something unshakable. Empathy without truth isn't really empathy, it's performance. True empathy says, I feel your pain, but I also love you enough to tell you what I see. It says, I understand where you are, but I also want to see you move forward. That's what keeps friendships alive. So if you've been silencing yourself, if you've been choosing peace over honesty, if your empathy has become people-pleasing, understand this. You're not protecting your friendship, you're limiting it. You're keeping it from becoming the deep, strong, resilient bond it was meant to be. Empathy becomes people-pleasing when you trade truth for comfort. But real friendship can only survive on honesty. Empathy is powerful because it allows us to step into someone else's shoes. It helps us see the world through their eyes and feel some of what they're feeling. But here's where it can quietly become damaging. When empathy causes us to lose sight of our own boundaries, without realizing it, we start letting someone else's emotions dictate our lives. Their struggles become our struggles, their frustrations become our frustrations, and before long, the friendship is defined less by connection and more by how much space their pain is taking up in us. Boundaries are what keep relationships healthy. They're not walls to shut people out. They're the guardrails that help protect both sides. But when you're highly empathetic, setting boundaries can feel selfish. You think, if I say no, they'll feel abandoned. If I don't respond right away, they'll think I don't care. If I step back, I'll look cold. And so you keep saying yes, you keep showing up, even when you're exhausted. You keep opening the door wider and wider until suddenly, you don't have a door at all. You have no separation between your emotions and theirs. The problem is, when you lose boundaries, you also lose balance. A friendship without boundaries turns into a relationship where one person's pain spills over and floods both lives. And that kind of constant flooding doesn't strengthen a bond, it weakens it, because eventually, you're no longer responding out of love, you're responding out of obligation. An obligation never grows a friendship. Have you ever been in a place where a friend calls, and instead of feeling excited to hear from them, you feel a knot in your stomach? Not because you don't care about them, but because you already know the weight that conversation will carry. You already know it's going to drain you. That's usually not because the person is bad or intentionally taking advantage. It's because the boundaries have disappeared. You've taken on their burdens as if they were your own, and now, the friendship feels heavy instead of life-giving. And here's where empathy makes it tricky. You convince yourself this is love. You tell yourself that being available all the time, being open no matter what, being willing to carry whatever they hand you, that's what good friends do. But love isn't about losing yourself. Love isn't about saying yes until you're empty. Love is about showing up in a way that's healthy, sustainable, and real. Without boundaries, you don't actually love better, you just burn out faster. When we give without limits, we create an unhealthy pattern. The friend on the other side learns, often unconsciously, that you'll always be there, no matter what, no matter when. And while that sounds admirable, it can breed dependency. Instead of learning to process their own emotions, they begin to lean on you for every crisis, every disappointment, every frustration. And the longer that goes on, the more you become less of a friend and more of an emotional crutch. That's not friendship, that's imbalance disguised as care. Boundaries, on the other hand, create space for both people to be whole. They allow you to say, I care deeply about you, but I can't carry this for you. I can walk beside you, but I can't walk it for you. And that's not unkind, that's love with strength. That's empathy that knows where to stop so it doesn't turn into self-destruction. Think about it like oxygen. On an airplane, they tell you to put on your own mask first before helping someone else. Why? Because if you're gasping for air, you're not really helping anybody. In the same way, if your boundaries are gone and you're drowning in someone else's emotions, you can't be the steady presence they actually need. You're too weighed down to lift anyone up. And here's another truth, friendships need more than shared pain. They need laughter, they need joy, they need rest, they need space for both people to bring who they are, not just their struggles, but their light. Without boundaries, friendships become defined by hardship alone, and that's when you start asking yourself why the relationship doesn't feel fulfilling anymore. It's not unloving to say no, it's not cold to create space, it's not wrong to recognize where your responsibility ends and theirs begins. In fact, that's the only way to keep empathy from turning into a barrier, because when you hold boundaries, you preserve the health of the relationship. You protect your own heart so you can continue to show up authentically, not resentfully. The truth is, boundaries don't weaken empathy, they strengthen it. They keep your care sustainable, they allow you to love without losing yourself, they protect the friendship from becoming a place of constant depletion. And most importantly, they remind both people that love isn't about absorbing each other's lives, it's about walking together, side by side, with enough space for both hearts to breathe. Empathy without boundaries doesn't build connection, it slowly suffocates it. One of the quietest ways empathy can damage a friendship is through the resentment it leaves behind when you don't allow yourself to say no. On the surface, it looks harmless. You want to be a good friend, so you keep showing up, you keep answering the late night calls, you keep rearranging your schedule, you keep lending an ear, even when you're tired, even when your own plate is full. At first it feels like love, it feels like sacrifice, but what builds underneath, layer by layer, is something much more dangerous. Resentment, and resentment doesn't announce itself loudly. It creeps in slowly, quietly, until one day the friendship you thought you were protecting doesn't feel like a friendship at all. It feels like a burden. The reason resentment grows so easily in these situations is because empathy often tricks you into believing you can't say no. You tell yourself, if I turn them down, they'll think I don't care. If I say I can't listen right now, I'll hurt them. If I put myself first, I'll look selfish. So instead of setting boundaries, you say yes. You say yes when you're exhausted, yes when you're busy, yes even when you know deep down you don't want to. And while your mouth says yes, your heart is quietly saying, I wish I hadn't. That's where the resentment begins. At first, you can ignore it, you brush it aside, reminding yourself that this is what friends do. But over time, that feeling grows, every new request feels heavier, every conversation feels more draining, and without realizing it, you begin to associate that person not with joy, not with laughter, not with connection, but with obligation. You stop looking forward to their calls, their visits, their texts. You start feeling tension in your chest every time their name shows up on your phone. That's the silent effect of resentment. It changes how you see the entire friendship, and here's the most ironic part. Your friend often has no idea this is happening. From their perspective, you're still available, you're still supportive, you're still showing up. They think everything is fine. Meanwhile, inside, you're keeping score. You're tallying all the times you said yes when you wanted to say no. You're remembering all the moments you swallowed your own needs to make space for theirs. You're replaying the sacrifices they never even realized you were making. And eventually, that unspoken scorecard becomes too heavy to carry. The tragedy is that resentment usually doesn't explode all at once. It leaks out, it shows up in little sighs, short responses, irritation over small things. The friendship starts to feel tense, but no one can name why. And that's because the root cause isn't visible. It's buried under all those unsaid no's, all those unspoken boundaries, all that quiet frustration you thought was empathy. What makes this even more dangerous is that resentment doesn't just hurt the relationship, it changes you, it makes you colder. It makes you more distant, it hardens your heart toward the very person you once cared so deeply about. And the sad part is, it wasn't their actions alone that got you here, it was your silence. It was your inability to say, I can't right now, or that's not something I can take on. It was your empathy convincing you that saying no was unkind, when in reality, saying yes all the time was what destroyed the friendship from within. Saying no is not a rejection of your friend, it's an act of honesty. It's telling them, I love you enough to be real with you. I care enough to show you my limits instead of pretending I don't have any. That kind of honesty doesn't create distance, it creates respect. Because deep down, most people don't want you to be available out of obligation. They want to know that when you show up, it's because you really chose to, not because you felt trapped into it. The truth is, resentment is preventable. It doesn't have to grow if you're willing to be honest earlier. It doesn't have to poison the friendship if you're brave enough to draw lines before you reach your breaking point. Saying no may feel uncomfortable in the moment, but it protects the long-term health of the relationship. It keeps your yes meaningful. It keeps your empathy from becoming a slow drain that leaves nothing behind. When you let resentment grow unchecked, it doesn't just affect you, it robs the friendship of its joy. Conversations feel forced, laughter feels rare, presence feels like performance, but when you create space for your own needs, when you're willing to say no, you actually give the friendship room to breathe again. You allow it to return to balance, and most importantly, you protect your heart from hardening towards someone you truly care about. So remember this, empathy that never says no will eventually grow into resentment, and resentment is the silent killer of friendships. Friendship was never meant to be built on empathy alone. As powerful as empathy is, if it becomes the only thing holding a relationship together, the friendship can start to feel heavy, one-dimensional, and even draining. Because real friendship is about so much more than sharing struggles, it's about joy, it's about laughter that makes your stomach hurt. It's about late-night conversations that leave you inspired, not exhausted. It's about accountability, the kind of honesty that challenges you to grow into a better version of yourself. Empathy is a part of that, yes, but it's not the whole story. What happens when empathy dominates a friendship is that the relationship begins to revolve around problems. Every interaction centers on what went wrong, what's hurting, what needs to be fixed. You stop celebrating the good moments because you're too busy managing the hard ones. And while that might feel like loyalty, it slowly robs the friendship of the joy that made it worth having in the first place. Because a real bond isn't just about being there when life is falling apart, it's also about being there when life is good. It's about sharing victories, celebrating milestones, and simply enjoying the presence of each other. Think about it. Have you ever had a friend who only came around when they needed to vent, but never when they wanted to celebrate? Over time, that relationship stops feeling like a friendship and starts feeling like a counseling session. And even if your empathy makes you willing to sit through those sessions, something inside of you begins to feel incomplete. You miss the laughter, the spontaneity, the lightness that friendships are supposed to bring. That's why empathy, while necessary, cannot be the only glue that holds a relationship together. Another thing that happens when empathy takes the driver's seat is that accountability disappears. You hesitate to challenge your friend. You don't call them out when they're wrong. You avoid telling them hard truths because you don't want to add to their pain. But here's the problem with that. Growth never comes without challenge. If your empathy stops you from speaking the truth, then it's not helping your friend, it's enabling them. Real love, real care says, I'll celebrate you, I'll sit with you, and I'll also tell you when you need to do better. That's what separates true friendship from surface-level comfort, and this is where balance comes in. A healthy friendship makes room for the full spectrum of life. It makes room for pain and joy, for tears and laughter, for support and accountability. It allows both people to bring their struggles without letting those struggles define the relationship. That's the kind of bond that can last. That's the kind of connection that doesn't just survive through hard seasons, but thrives through them. Empathy has to be paired with presence. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do for a friend isn't to step into their sadness, but to pull them into joy. Sometimes they don't need you to sit in the dark with them. They need you to open a window, to remind them that life still has beauty, that there are still reasons to smile. That's still empathy, but it's empathy that knows its limits. It's empathy that refuses to let pain define the entire friendship. There's also something important about shared accountability. If all you ever do is empathize, you risk creating a relationship where honesty is lost. But when you dare to say, I care about you too much not to tell you this, you give the friendship depth. That's what makes someone trust you with their whole heart, not just their struggles, because they know you won't just comfort them, you'll also sharpen them. And deep down, that's what we all want, friends who make us better, not just friends who make us feel understood. When you think about the best friendships in your life, chances are they weren't built only on shared pain. They were built on shared life. They were built on the times you laughed until you cried, the moments you encouraged each other, the ways you challenged each other, the memories that had nothing to do with fixing problems. That's the reminder empathy sometimes hides from us, that friendship isn't meant to be about carrying burdens all the time. It's meant to be about living fully together, so when empathy threatens to become the barrier, you have to consciously shift the focus. You have to remind yourself that the goal of friendship isn't to carry everything for each other, but to walk beside each other. It's not to make sure no one ever feels discomfort, but to ensure that both people feel seen, celebrated, and loved for who they are. The danger of empathy alone is that it narrows the friendship down to survival, but the gift of balance, the mix of empathy, joy, accountability, and presence, is that it allows the friendship to thrive. And that's what makes it last, because true friendship isn't built only on empathy, it's built on the wholeness of life shared together.